Gary, thank you. And I don't want to make this a bouquet tossing contest, but we weren't anywhere in the United States Senate until Jerry Moran signed up. And I remember that conversation, and all over the community, people were saying, now we're getting somewhere. We're in the position to finally launch a bipartisan force for internet freedom and digital innovation. It would not have happened had not Jerry Moran been willing to break from the pack. And so we're very, very appreciative of that. To Gary, kind of the bionic man of consumer electronics and innovation, great to be with you. And Alexis was talking, and as you know, the theme of Reddit is ask anything. Ask him anything. I want to just amend it, given the possibility that people may ask questions. Ask me almost anything. You can ask Alexis you can ask Alexis anything. But I thought I'd just take a quick minute and give you my sense of where we are, and spend just a second or two talking about where we've been. One of the areas that I've felt has been really critical, looking back at the history, was Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. And had we not been able to pass that legislation, I think there's a real question of whether you would have had social media and whether you would have had people invest in social media, because had that legislation not passed, you would have essentially established secondary liability, websites and others, for content that got posted on a site and they didn't have any control over it. And I know of no other instance where two separate approaches went to the Supreme Court. One was essentially a censorship approach. One was essentially ours, a voluntary approach that empowered families and recognized that you should do no harm in terms of technology. We prevailed, and one of the things that makes me feel good is now you can have Alexis here and you can ask him anything while you give me a pass. The question, as Gary really suggested, is so what happens now? And I think, having established the principle that we want the government to do no harm, that we want to keep the government out of the way of innovation, I really think our next banner is about the freedom to compete. The freedom to compete and sort of how it's going to be expressed in a variety of ways. One area, for example, I'm particularly concerned about is when you look at digital goods and services, mobile apps, media content. I want to make sure that there are clear rules that ensure that these very exciting technologies do not face discriminatory and multiple taxes. They increasingly are facing this threat, and I think it would really do great harm to innovation. So that'd be one area. Second area is, given the fact that in Section 230, we said that internet users should be empowered to control what content comes into their home. Today, I think we want to make sure that users are better empowered to ensure that their content isn't inappropriately in the public domain or in the hands of law enforcement or in the hands of people who basically see bits and bytes just as a way to try to find an unfair advantage and turn it into a financial reward. So I think you're going to see a continued focus on those sort of privacy-related issues. And my sense is the people who are going to do well financially in America are people who understand how important privacy has become to the American people. One last area, and something Jerry and I have talked about in our discussions, and that is we cannot close off opportunities for new technologies at our borders. The internet is the shipping lane of the 21st century. This is the place in which we can find a way to make sure that all the exciting products and technologies that are out on this floor get into global markets around the world. But the trade rules, and I chair the Senate Finance Subcommittee on International Trade, have not kept up with the times. And I'm very concerned that when you have a bipartisan coalition in the Senate that leads a push for innovation and digital freedom and wins in the Congress with friends and allies on both sides of the Hill, it could be unraveled in terms of some of the international negotiations that take place, because the trade rules and even the trade discussions do not put the same kind of focus on the digital economy that they do on what has been essentially the traditional economics that the incumbents have always made their priority. I am going to do my best to make sure that in every single trade negotiation, starting with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is arguably the biggest international trade discussion we've had since the discussions about the World Trade Organization a number of years ago, that they now put front and center in those negotiations opportunities for the kinds of technologies and products you see out on this floor to get into global markets. And to suffice it to say, some of those big markets today are very happy to be able to discriminate against the people out on this floor. And that digital protectionism, and there's no other way to describe it, is digital protectionism, is the kind of thing that I think you're going to see Democrats and Republicans in the Congress fight. So let me use that as kind of an opening salvo, and softball questions for me whenever you get to it. And again, Gary, I thought coming over here, and Jerry and I were talking about it, is Darrell Issa and I stood at this microphone about a year ago, a little under a year ago, and a number of you were looking at us and you said, kind of nice guys and seem to have some good points, but they are going to be a sizzling meal for all of the powerful forces in the legacy content industry. And because of the wonderful work done by folks like Alexis, there in the middle of January, 15 million people emailed their members of Congress. And I know a couple of friends, called and they said, "What happened?" And I said, "Well, are we a little bit less cynical about government this morning?" And people saw that the darkness began to give way to some light with respect to technology policy. Gary, it couldn't have happened without you and all the leadership that you've given as well. And for that, we say a big thanks.